Chairman, I can confirm the live stream has started. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Louise. We'll move on from here then. Right, good morning to everybody and welcome to our December meeting of Cornwall IFCA. Before we start our business of the day, I'd just like to go through the protocols for the meeting, same as before, but I'll go through them. Today's meeting is being live streamed to the public via Microsoft Teams, and it's also being recorded. May I remind members and officers to introduce themselves each time you speak and turn your video and microphone off when you finish speaking. If the council's live stream fails during the meeting and we can't share the proceedings, I'll adjourn the meeting so that the access can be restored. If the issue can't be resolved, I'll halt the meeting and the remaining business will be concluded at a future date. If a member experiences a technical issue, I'll adjourn for a short period to try and re-establish their connection. Members wishing to speak or ask a question preferably should indicate by raising their hand on the bar. Failing that, if they type an X in the box, it will be seen and noted. Thank you. As I call members to speak, I'll just remind them to switch on their microphone, and if they cannot be heard, the Democratic officer will advise you. Votes will be taken using a roll call procedure. The Democratic officer will read out the recommendation and the name of the proposer and seconder, and they'll then call on each committee member in turn. You should confirm your name and advise whether you vote in favour or against the recommendation, or whether you wish to abstain from the vote. The Democratic officer will then count the votes and advise the result accordingly. Where a member has declared a non-registrable interest, a disclosable pecuniary interest, or an interest by virtue of any trade union membership in a matter, they must leave the virtual meeting. Their departure will be confirmed and they will be invited to rejoin the meeting at an appropriate time. Should the meeting be prolonged, I will call a short comfort break between agenda items at a suitable time. Right, that's the protocol complete, so I will move on to our first item on the agenda, which chairman announcements, of which I have none. And I'll now call for the Democratic officer to give any apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. We've got apologies today from Tony Berry, Councillor Buscombe and Councillor Brown. And can I also do a little check just so that the members of the public know which members are on the committee today? So I'll just ask, I'll say committee members' names, and then if you can confirm your name and whether you're an MMO appointee or a Cornwall councillor. So if I could start with John Brooks, please.
John Brooks, MMO appointee.
Thank you. And Graham Code.
Good morning, Graham Code, Cornwall councillor from Hale South.
Thank you. Victoria Hobson.
Victoria Hobson, MMO appointee.
Thank you. Mark Kasmarek.
Mark Kasmarek, Cornwall councillor.
Thank you. Bob Edgerton.
Yes, thank you. Bob Edgerton, Cornwall councillor.
Carly Elson.
Yeah, Carly Elson. I work for the MMO as an MMO appointee.
Sangeeta McNair.
Good morning, Sangeeta McNair. I'm a statutory appointee for Natural England.
Celia Mitchell.
Celia Mitchell, MMO appointee.
Thank you. John Munday.
John Munday, MMO appointee.
Thank you. James Mustoe.
James Mustoe, Cornwall councillor for Mevagizzy.
Andrew Pascoe.
Andrew Pascoe, MMO appointee.
And Tony Tomlinson.
MMO appointee, Tony Tomlinson. Yeah.
Simon Toms.
Yeah, Simon Toms, statutory representative for the Environment Agency.
Thank you. Nick Tregenza.
Yeah, Nick Tregenza, MMO appointee.
Thanks. And Ruth Williams.
Morning, Ruth Williams, MMO appointee.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. That's everyone who's in attendance today.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Emma. I will just go back what I should have done in the announcements. Really, having heard Carly there, I would just welcome Carly to our committee, replacing Daisy May. who's been seconded elsewhere, and I'd just like to record the thanks of this committee to Daisy for all of his work and his time with us. Right, if I can move on to item 3 on the agenda, declarations of interest. If anyone has any declarations of interest on today's business, if they would either state now or at the time and remove themselves. Thank you. Right, on to item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of September. And I will go through these page by page for accuracy only. All right, I will call the pages as the pages are written in your agenda. Page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, 9, 10, and
Tony, I've got just an accuracy query on page 10. It's right at the top, item number 2. It says the vague nature of the works, unavoidable bycatch. I think it should be words, just for accuracy.
Okay, Emma.
Thank you, that's noted, Ruth.
Thank you. Would somebody like to propose, in that case, with that amendment made, that we accept the proposals, please? And I'll hand over to Emma at this stage.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the recommendation is that the minutes of the meeting of the Cornwall IFCA held on 18th of September 2020 were correctly recorded and they be signed by the Chairman with the update from Ruth Williams to change the word to words. This has been proposed by Ruth Williams and seconded by Nick Tregenza. I'll now call out committee members' names in turn. Please confirm your name and advise whether you vote in favour, against or abstain from the proposal. John Brooks.
John Brooks, in favour.
Thank you. Graham Code.
In favour.
Victoria Hobson.
In favour.
Mark Kaczmarek.
I've got to defer, I wasn't at the meeting.
Thank you. Bob Edgerton.
Bob Edgerton, abstain. I wasn't on the committee then.
Carly Elson.
Also abstain, as I was also not on the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you to McNair.
In favour.
Thank you. Celia Mitchell.
In favour.
Thank you. John Munday. John Munday.
In favour.
Thank you. James Mustoe.
For.
Thank you. Andrew Pascoe.
In favour.
Thank you. Tony Tomlinson.
In favour.
Simon Toms. Simon Toms?
Yes, in favour.
Thank you. Nick Tregenza.
In favour.
And Ruth Williams.
In favour.
Thank you. Just be one moment and I'll confirm the numbers on. Thank you, Chairman. That's 12 in favour and 3 abstaining, so that vote's carried. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Emma. Okay, on to item 5, questions from the public. We have 5 questions. They have all been submitted, but the questioners will not be here to read them, so I will read the questions and the responses on behalf of Cornwall IFCA. First question from Mark Pilcher of Truro. The Coastal Fishing Nets Salmonella Protection Bylaw. The proposed bylaw, if agreed and implemented, will cover significant coastal areas, 26% as quoted in the paper, around Cornwall. Given the high number of under 10 vessels in the Cornish fleet and the historic focus by many of these vessels using monofilament nets for marine fish close to the shore, what enforcement priority will SIFCA officers place on patrolling and regulating these areas at times when the 3-metre headline rule could easily be compromised? And the answer would be from Cornwall IFCA, this would be included in our overall risk-based enforcement plan, which covers all compliance issues within our district, and prioritises them for enforcement action, subject to the prevailing conditions, new intel and the availability of staff and vessels. As some of our colleagues at the Environment Agency are warranted as Cornwall IFCOs, we would wish to continue undertaking joint patrols with them where possible, particularly where there is an enforcement issue relating to salmonids, which are of direct interest to the Environment Agency. On to question 2 from Graham Hicks of Redruth. The current illegal targeting of migrating bass by some Cornish netters should cease on February the 1st, 2021, when the commercial closed period for landing bass starts. Does Cornwall IFCO agree that its proposal to provide a scoping paper to the Bylaw working group in February 21 will be too late to have any impact on the illegal targeting taking place from November 2020 to January 2021? And if so, will Cornwall IFCO move more quickly on this urgent issue? And the answer from Cornwall IFCO is as follows. There is no information available yet on the proposal for the 2021 EU bass emergency measures, but we assume that the closed period will remain the same for 2021. Bringing this matter forward for discussion by Bylaw working group in early February is the fastest mechanism we have available to take this forward. Question 3 from Trev OP at Redruth. At the Cornwall IFCO committee meeting held on 18th September 2020, Sam Davis advised that Cornwall IFCO and the MMO would shortly be signing a data sharing agreement. Is this now signed, and is Cornwall IFCO now using data received from the MMO under data sharing agreement in its enforcement activities? And the answer, the data sharing agreement has been signed by both parties, having agreed the principle of data sharing between both organisations. We are awaiting confirmation of the process for accessing the information, as there will be limitations on the data sets which the MMO will legally be allowed to share with us. Question 4, Mr. J. Leahy. Can Cornwall IFCO please confirm that it is not enforcing the 2010 fixed engines bylaw, thereby netters being able to set nets with less than 3 metres of water above the headlines that are likely to kill salmonids, and that Cornwall IFCO has been advised by both DEFRA and the Environment Agency that the bylaw is enforceable, and no alternative written legal advice on whether the 2010 engines bylaw is enforceable has been obtained, brackets only verbal advice, and the QC advice received in 2016 did not discuss the 2010 fixed engines bylaw. The answer is as follows. In regard to the enforcement of the 3 metre headline depth restriction under the fixed engines bylaw 2010, Cornwall IFCO has only received legal advice from its solicitor agent. It was provided orally and in the context of a real investigation, advising against continuing to take legal action against any person under that bylaw. It is perhaps worth mentioning that at the time the advice was received, the authority was well underway with developing a replacement bylaw that would appropriately protect salmon and sea trout in its district. So there was an expectation it would be made well before now, and thereby rapidly address the unwelcoming enforcement situation. It is hoped that the draft fixed and drift nets salmonid protection, the bylaw 2021, which is under discussion during this meeting, goes on to be made by the authority and is confirmed by DEFRA, as this will introduce a 3 metre headline depth restriction for fixed nets that is enforceable. And the final question 5 is from Frank Jones of Swansea. The bass stocks is in bad shape, and illegal bass landings by Cornish netters who are targeting bass congregating prior to spawning are making a mockery of Cornwall IFCO's stated policy to lead, champion and manage a sustainable environment and inshore fisheries, to ensure healthy and sustainable fisheries. The publicly available MMO landing data for Cornwall shows that a number of vessels have landed bass in the closed period or in excess of catch limits, or with bass regularly representing 100% of the catch. This is in clear contravention of fisheries regulation. What action will Cornwall IFCO take in addressing this urgent matter and the safeguarding of bass stocks? And the answer is as follows. The MMO data shows that the landing of bass by a range of vessels, including by those using hook and line, where landings are likely to be 100% bass. Landings are also attributed to the default gear type for a vessel, which may not reflect the actual gear used to catch bass. If there are instances of landings being made during the closed period, we would have expected this to have been investigated by the MMO at the time of reporting. However, in light of recent landings of bass by netting vessels, officers will take all current relevant information to our bylaw working group to explore what options are available to this authority, as well as to continue pursuing national action by both the MMO and DEFRA. That is the end of the questions from the public, which brings us on to item 6 on the agenda, the Budget Monitor Report. Sam?
Hello, good morning everybody. Lovely to see you earlier during the technical checks, and sadly we can't see each other face to face, but you know, maybe next year. So as usual for this point in the agenda, we have the Budget Monitor for the preceding few months. As you can imagine, the budget has very much been affected by different working arrangements that we have within the IFCA. We are still working primarily from home, but also keeping the vessels active where possible. So you'll see from the papers that we are currently have a favourable variance of 64,999. We have made expenditure directly for PPE of around 11,000 relating to COVID expenditure. And there's also additional expenditure that we are incurring for the provision of things like extra data for holding some of these meetings, particularly for the vessels. Working through the report very briefly then, we have some underspend within the administrative part of the report, administrative part of the budget. That's mainly in delays to external legal expenses and efficiencies within the service, less travel, less accommodation, because those elements come out of that point. I think there is likely to be more expenditure in the final quarter related to some of those items. With respect to the enforcement budget, we had savings due to the reduction in fuel costs, as St Piran was actually within refit for a considerable part of this period. And there's also commensurate reductions in terms of things like catering as well, because of those patrols not taking place. We'll continue to monitor the budget, and we expect a balanced position by the end of the financial year. As with research, we've had some employee-related savings, slight overspend at the moment due to supplies and services, but we anticipate that, again, budgets will be in line across the entire service by the end of the year. Reference there also to our income being reduced. We haven't been taking part in as many sort of joint activities as we would normally do. There is a possibility of some joint working in the new year, which would be at cost to the MMO, but we've got to wait and see what happens there. So there may be a little bit of income. Other than that, the report gives you the reserves position moving forwards from here. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that, Sam. Does anyone have any questions for Sam? No? In that case, could I now hand this over to Emma to take, propose and second on this issue? Emma.
Thank you, Chairman. Would members like to indicate if they wish to propose or second the recommendation? Councillor Kaczmarek, are you proposing the recommendation?
Happy to propose it.
Thank you. And Councillor Code, I can see you seconding that.
Yes, I second it.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the recommendation is that the 2020-21 budget monitoring and reserves position for April 2020 to October 2020 is shown at Appendix 1 and 2 be noted and agreed. This has been proposed by Councillor Kaczmarek and seconded by Councillor Code. I'll now call out committee members' names in turn. Please confirm your name and advise whether you vote in favour, against or abstain from the proposal. So, John Brooks.
In favour.
Graham Code.
In favour.
Victoria Hobson.
In favour.
Councillor Kaczmarek.
For.
Councillor Edgerton.
For.
Carly Elson.
In favour.
Thank you. Sangeeta McNair.
In favour.
Celia Mitchell.
In favour.
John Mundy.
For.
James Musto. Sorry, James Musto.
For.
Thank you. Andrew Pascoe.
In favour.
Tony Tomlinson.
In favour.
Simon Toms.
In favour.
Nick Tregenza.
For.
Ruth Williams.
For.
Thank you. I confirm that's unanimous, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Emma. And then the next item, item 7 on the agenda, the revenue budget report. Sam.
Thank you, Chairman. It's that time again, it's December, and we are looking to set our budget for next year. This is obviously at a very difficult time for Cornwall Council, who are our major contributor to our budget. So in setting this budget, we are very aware of the continuing impact of COVID on the council's overall budget. And as a result, with advice from the council, we have set the budget at £24,052 above last year's budget, giving us a total of £1,202,716. That includes the contributions that we would expect from DEFRA, who contribute around £330,000 as part of the ongoing new burdens contribution to IFCAs. That particular contribution is set within DEFRA's existing budget for the coming year, as we've had a single comprehensive spending review settlement. We're awaiting confirmation back from DEFRA about the exact settlement, but we have set this budget on the assumption that we will receive what we received last year. In terms of setting the levy and minimising the increase as ever, because our main costs relate, about 62% of our costs relate to employee costs. Every year with things like superannuation and national insurance, that actually increases the headroom required in the budget. So we have to make cuts elsewhere, as we have in previous years. The changes in the way that we've been working remotely have offered us some ability to cut some money away with things like travel expenses, so things like rail. Previously we would have been going to meetings a lot in London. I think really that won't happen now. It'll be very occasional, hopefully, once we're all able to travel a little bit more freely again. But otherwise, we've just shaved little bits off the budget here and there where we can. One item that did keep the overall budget increase down was the HM Treasury's decision to, as they've described it, press pause on the national pay award that staff would have received. So that did reduce the increase in our budget. I want to record my thanks to our new accountants, Julia Harvey and Roxana Maliska, and also to Colin Trundle for his work on the budget, and for Claire Derriman's work across the budgets. And I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sam. Questions, please, if any. Sangeeta first, and then Mark.
Good morning. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Sam. It was just a question about the reserves, and whether we have a policy about the reserves not falling between a certain percentage of the revenue budget, and if so, how that's worked out. So just a bit of clarity over that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Sam.
Yes, certainly. Our reserves balance position has a minimum recommended balance of 200,600. So the reserves are set to stay above that. So it's rather than a percentage, it's set at a minimum level. So our reserves there are, as you can imagine, for coping with large amounts of expenditure should we need to find that, and also are there and have been there for renewal of vessels, which at some point we will have to do, and that point is getting closer. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, Sam.
Mark?
Yes, thank you. Sam, on page 21, paragraph 2.7, it states, we assume we'll be asked to deliver additional functions on behalf of DEFRA as the new UK fisheries management regime starts. Something is going to happen next year, and obviously the talks over Brexit are still ongoing, but it is going to put more pressure on us as an EFCA on policing the waters and enforcement. Have we not had any indication off DEFRA what additional money we might get to do this before we set our budget?
Thanks, Mark. It's a good question. When we were asked to set our budgets and make our representation to DEFRA for the new burdens money earlier this year, originally it was for a comprehensive spending review period of 3 years, and we were told that we were to expect what we had had previously and no more. That expectation has carried forwards for this 1 year comprehensive spending review. So at the moment, there doesn't appear to be any additional money for what new duties we might have. With respect to specifically to enforcement duties, if we were going to be doing work for the MMO, which we have done in the past, and we're lined up to do some over the new year period, those would be outside our district and those would be chartered and paid for. But in terms of other responsibilities, that's still evolving. And I think I made reference in the paper to, if we've got a slight underspend, it gives us a little bit of a cushion there. But these are questions that we have for DEFRA as well, moving forwards for the, from 21 onwards, how much this, extra duties and what it could cost. But at the moment, it would appear to be a standstill from DEFRA.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I just know what the government's like on making promises for funding and not delivering.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Bob Edgerton.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it was following up on the question about reserves, and the answer was that we have to hold at least 200,000, but we've got well over 600,000 there, and there was a reference to, possibly having to replace a vessel. Do we not have a policy of actually specifically putting a reserve by for vessel and building that over time so that we've got an idea of when the vessel might need replacing and how much it would be? It just seems a bit sort of vague to have, an extra 400,000 for possibly replacing a vessel at some unknown point in the future. So do we have a plan, and are we building towards something, or is it just there as a just in case and we have to hire something in? So just a bit of clarity on that, please.
Thank you. That's a really good question. The replacement of the vessels is something that is of concern, moving forwards. The reserves were set there specifically for the replacement of St. Piran, which is the largest of the assets. But in the past, we did actually use our reserves for the purchase of Tidal Lily, our research vessel, which we bought secondhand. We put money aside every year as part of the main revenue budget to pay for refits every 2 years. But our finances have been at a state in the more recent years that it's been difficult to put by additional money for the replacement of the vessel. we are awaiting, I think the chairman has a meeting this afternoon regarding the replacement European Fisheries Fund, or basically the UK version of what we would have had as funding through that mechanism for the replacement of assets. So we're waiting to see what kind of facility there might be in there. When the patrol vessel was originally purchased, she was purchased with both European money and money from central government. We're aware that that might be quite different moving forwards, but it's a subject of concern for all IFCAs that are having to do this. It's trying to be able to put reserves aside at the same time as running a revenue budget that's actually fairly tight. So I'm hoping that the conversations that Chairman has this afternoon and moving forwards, that there's some good news with regards to the replacement of assets, because it's definitely of relevance to us, but it will be for other IFCAs as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, thank you for that, Bob. If I could just ask, is there anyone else with a question for Sam? If not, I'd just add, just to Sam's part, that the new burdens funding, ever since its first inception 10 years ago, hasn't increased at all. So despite everything else that's gone on, we have had to operate on a fixed budget on that basis. Okay, right, if I can hand over to Emma now for the recommendation, please, Emma.
Thank you, Chairman. Would members like to indicate if you'd like to propose or second the recommendation? That's Ruth William proposing.
Yes, proposing.
Thank you. And John Munday seconding.
Yes, seconding.
Thank you, John. Okay, I'll now call out committee members' names in turn. Please confirm whether you vote in favour, against, or wish to abstain from the proposal. So John Brooks.
In favour.
Graham Code.
In favour.
Victoria Hobson.
In favour.
Marcus Marrick.
For.
Bob Edgerton.
For.
Carly Elson.
In favour.
Sangeeta McNair.
In favour.
Celia Mitchell.
In favour.
John Munday.
For.
James Mustoe.
For.
Andrew Pascoe.
In favour.
Tony Tomlinson.
In favour.
Simon Tongs.
In favour.
Nick Tregenza.
For.
And Ruth Williams.
For.
Thank you, Chairman. That vote's carried unanimously.
Thank you, Emma. That takes us on to item 8, the bylaw working group. Sam.
Yeah, I'm afraid it's me again. This is an update from the most recent bylaw working group we had on the 9th of November. And thank you, as always, to bylaw working group members for the time that they give to that meeting and this process. So it just summarises the discussions that were had at the meeting. So firstly, we discussed the review of the Cornwall Closed Areas European Marine Sites #2 bylaw, which trips off the tongue, doesn't it? So in our previous meeting in September, we discussed the fact that this bylaw now needs to be reviewed and potentially amended. And we talked again with members about that. One of the issues that's holding that up at the moment, or certainly has a bearing on it, is the national discussions around Inshore Vms, so for the smaller vessels under 12 metres. That project's been, well, it's taken a long time to come to fruition, and obviously is quite relevant to any controls that we might have within this bylaw, which is a bylaw that prohibits access to towed gear to certain parts of the district where we've got European marine sites. We are aware of other options that are being trialled in Scotland, and we're also aware that the IVMS project is still ongoing, but we wanted to share that with members. And with a view to looking again at our next bylaw working group to see if there'd been any movement with regards to IVMS, because we're aware we do need to move forward with this bylaw. We also discussed ring netting on seagrass within marine protected areas, and we will have to do some survey work next year to look at impacts of ring nets on seagrass within those marine protected areas. So we just reported that. We then went on to talk about the fixed and drift net salmonella protection bylaw and talk to members about the draft bylaw. But as that's now a separate item, we will discuss that in more depth in the next agenda item. But at that point, members discussed the draft and their sort of feedback on it. We also provided an update on the Crustacean Fisheries Management Plan, which is the first of the fisheries management plans that we are engaged in. And Colin reported that we have a new member of staff on a temporary contract who is working specifically to develop the Crustacean Fisheries Management Plan for us, so that by the end of March, we should have a range of options there. And a sort of structure and the detail within a first draft, which will be fantastic. The other part of this agenda item is for the replacement of a member on bylaw working group due to David Muirhead's retirement. So that forms the other part of the recommendation. In terms of the outcomes of the meeting, we will be looking at other tracking devices just to see if there's the potential for use of those on our vessels for trialling whilst we wait for the IFVMS to develop. Colin's team will be looking at survey designs for next year for the ring net and work on eelgrass. As the fixed and drift nets salmonella protection bylaw, as I said, is separate, and the Crustacean Fisheries Management Plan we will be looking to have a draft by the end of March. With respect to sort of moving forwards, we do need to review this bylaw, and I think it will form the European Marine Closed European Marine Sites bylaw, so that will form a major part of work for next year. With respect to the other part of the recommendation, which was for replacement on the bylaw working group, we asked for expressions of interest, and the expression of interest to be received, the only one we received was from Andrew Pascoe, and that is included in the pack. So I'm very happy to take questions on any of those items.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Questions, please. Sangeeta.
Hi, thank you, Tony. Thank you, Sam. Yeah, it was a comment on the first part on the bylaw, and then a question on the second part. Yeah, thank you for the report from the bylaw working group. It's really comprehensive. I just wanted to add as well just how well, frustrating is a word that it's taken so many years for the inshore vessel monitoring systems to be in place. And we have, obviously, we've got marine protected areas where we see in the enforcement reports that there are incursions, and it's really it puts additional pressure on the officers to gather that evidence without that there. So it's great to hear that there are other alternatives that Cornwall Inshore are looking at outside of continually waiting for the government. So that's really heartening. So that's great. And the second was just a question about the ring netting, and in 2.2 the seagrass in marine protected areas, and it was just to clarify whether that was over several marine protected areas, or if, which ones they affected.
Yes, it is over all the ones where it's a conservation feature.
Okay, brilliant, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, thanks very much, Sangeeta. Are there any further questions? If there are none, I in that case will hand over to Emma for the recommendation.
Thank you, Chairman. We have got a two-part recommendation on this one. We do need to take proposals for the member of the bylaw working group as well. I think Sam mentioned that we have actually only had one expression of interest for that. So do we have a proposer for the recommendation? Point 1, members note the contents of the report, and also a proposal for the bylaw working group member, please. John Monday, you have your hand up. Hello, John Monday. You might be on mute.
John Brooks also has got his hand up, Emma.
Yeah, I propose that we accept the recommendation and also that we appoint Andrew Pascoe as a member of the bylaw working group.
Thank you, Mr. Monday. And John Brooks, are you seconding that proposal?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you. No one else has indicated they wish to speak or have their hands up. So I'll read that recommendation now, which is number 1, members note the contents of this report. And number 2, Andrew Pascoe is appointed as member to the bylaw working group. It's proposed by John Monday and seconded by John Brooks. So I'll now call out committee members' names in turn. Please confirm whether you're in favour, against, or wish to abstain from the vote. Okay, so John Brooks.
In favour.
Thank you. Graham Code.
In favour.
Thank you. Victoria Hobson.
In favour.
Mark Kasmarek.
For.
Bob Edgerton.
For.
Carly Olsen.
In favour.
Sangeeta McNair.
In favour.
Celia Mitchell.
In favour.
John Mundy.
For.
James Mustoe.
For.
Andrew Pascoe.
For, and thank you.
Tony Tomlinson.
For.
Simon Toms.
In favour.
Nick Tregenza.
For.
Ruth Williams.
For.
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that's unanimous in favour of that proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. That takes us on to item 9 on the agenda, coastal fishing nets. Simon Cabin, I think you're taking that one.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I'd like to just start off by saying apologies for any confusion caused by the title on this agenda item. It's the Fix and Drift Net Salmonid Protection Bylaw and not a coastal fishing nets bylaw. It was renamed some time ago, and for some reason that somehow slipped into the titling of this agenda item by accident, so apologies for that. Before I get on to the bylaw itself, I just think it's important to start with a brief overview of the work that's been carried out by the authority on netting bylaws to put the development of this bylaw into context before I go through the elements of the actual bylaw we've got on the table before us in detail. So the authority began working on the development of new netting bylaws soon after Cornwall took over from the former Cornwall Sea Fisheries Committee, inheriting its bylaws and many other netting bylaws made by the Devon Sea Fisheries Committee because we moved our boundaries further east, and also the first time moving into the rivers where the Environment Agency or its predecessor organisations had made a number of bylaws. So due to a number of reasons, work on the river and estuarine fishing nets bylaw had become prioritised, and not least because management of sea fisheries in the inland tidal waters of Cornwall were no longer under the remit of the Environment Agency, and the inherited bylaws, many of which were over 100 years old, were no longer appropriate. So that netting chapter was concluded in 2017 with the single new river and estuarine fishing nets bylaw, for which the authority was proud to be awarded Bass Angler Sport Fishing Society's John Labello Award, Restoration Award. Since then, we've gone on to explore in great depth inshore netting and its potential effects on salmon and sea trout populations around the whole Cornish coastline. By exploring and consulting on the presence of salmonids and potential accidental interactions of these species with various types of nets used for catching sea fish, it's safe to say the amount of work undertaken by officers has been unprecedented. A wealth of information has been gathered and provided to members in order that an appropriate bylaw to protect salmonids could be developed. Now, you may recall that in 2019, a draft bylaw was developed by the bylaw working group, which was rather more complex and restrictive than the draft bylaw that you see presented before you today. Consultation on the bylaw proposals generated a very large and fairly negative response from commercial fishermen, including those who stood to be affected by displaced fishing effort. Now, a great deal of extra data was received at that time, demonstrating the importance of maintaining inshore fishing opportunities for hundreds of small-scale fishing businesses. And the members of the bylaw working group listened very hard to the concerns and decided that the balance between salmonid protection measures and inshore fishing opportunities should be readdressed. And that is the result of the bylaw that you now see before you today. I think it's important to stress that this latest draft bylaw, if made, would provide far greater protection measures for salmonids around the Cornwall coastline than has ever been seen before. It's 26% of the coastline being covered. It encompasses fixed net restrictions along parts of the coast that have never before been covered by bylaws to protect salmonids, and introduces for the first time 3 areas where both fixed and drift nets are prohibited. These 3 areas were selected because they exist at the entrance to rivers where salmon and or sea trout swim in and out, and where they are particularly vulnerable to accidental capture by drift nets and any fixed nets, irrespective of headline depth. I also want to draw attention to another matter that's been raised over the last few weeks and a lot in the past. Under historical bylaws that were made to restrict the minimum headline depth of fixed nets, you will have seen a phrase applying this restriction at any state of the tide. Now, in the draft bylaw that we have on the table today, those words no longer exist, and we have used the words at any time. A number of people have queried the new bylaw wording. They've been provided with an answer, which I think it would be sensible to share with you all now. So since 1987, perhaps understandably, there have been many questions that is what is meant by at any state of the tide. So therefore, to avoid such confusion, it was decided that new bylaw should simply apply the headline depth restriction at any time. The state of the tide is not important, as the bylaw seeks only to require that the upper 3 meters of the water column is not compromised by a fixed net at any time. I also want to reassure everyone that the enforcement of the minimum headline depth restriction would be treated in exactly the same way as it always has been under the legacy netting bylaws, despite the updated, if you like, plain English wording, which I would say is impossible to misunderstand. Now, I thought it'd be helpful to run through the areas, looking at the charts which have been produced in Appendix 2. If the chairman doesn't mind, I'll share some colour screen documents onto your computers now, and we'll go through these areas one by one, and hopefully everything will be nice and clear for you by the time we've got through that. So bear with me while I bring this up, and hopefully this will work. Come on. I'm not seeing it. Is anyone else?
Yes.
Yes.
Are you seeing? Is everyone seeing the agenda item 10, Appendix 2? Thank you.
Yeah.
And so yes. So yeah, I'm going to now scroll through one by one. So the first charts that we're going to look at are areas A to C, and these are the areas which concentrate on having full netting restrictions, if you like, for all fixed nets and drift nets. You will see on some of the charts that there's some doubly shaded areas, but I'll explain that as I come to them. So for this first one, we're looking here at the entrance to the Balancey River, which is at Boscastle, a particularly important river, I understand, for sea trout. So clearly, looking at the geography of the coastline there, any nets put across such a narrow entrance like that would severely compromise either salmon or sea trout moving in and out of that river. So that was decided as an area which needed extra protection. Scrolling down, hopefully this is working as we go to area B. We're looking here at the darker shaded area, the entrance, the direct entrance outside of the River Camel. You can see an area shaded to landward of a line drawn between Pentire and Stepper Point. Again, no fixed nets whatsoever and no drift nets. Moving down into area C, we look at the entrance to the Foy River. And again, you can see a line drawn there across the entrance, which gives the same protection there, prohibiting all fixed nets and drift nets. Moving on down now, we're coming to the areas A to I, and we're looking here specifically at the lighter shaded area, where the bylaw proposal is for a 3 metre minimum headline depth for fixed nets. So that is fairly similar to what we had before under old bylaws, historical bylaws, but no exemptions that used to exist under some of the previous bylaws. It's a 3 metre headline, straightforward ruling there, restricted at all times. Moving down to area B, we have an area of the coast to the north and the south of Newquay. This is a larger area than had previously been covered. I should explain a larger area of the coastline that's been covered, because we no longer go 1 nautical mile offshore. There's no need to have 3 metre headline, depth headline restrictions extending a great deal offshore, because it would be impossible to set fixed nets anywhere near the surface in deeper waters. So generally, we're trying to keep the boundary lines sensible in sort of 10 to 20 metre contours wherever possible, to make it appropriate to what we're actually trying to do here with fixed netting. Moving on down, we move to C. We move to Perrin Bay here. This is a new area, never ever been incorporated into previous bylaws for salmonid protection. So there we go for the 3 metre headline rule along that stretch of coast. Then the next one we come to is St Ives Bay. The previous bylaws have always been between Gadrevi Head and St Ives Head. You'll see here for the first time we're now moving it out to Clodgy Point, and therefore the beach around Porthmere is now covered by the 3 metre headline rule for the first time. Pedley Point to Cudden Point. This is a line that was drawn across Penzance Bay historically. There's no change there. That is the 3 metre headline rule carrying on as it has since 1987. And then coming down to the Falmouth Bay and to the east through Gerrans and Berrien Bay. For the first time, we have a line, a boundary, which makes sure that Falmouth Bay is properly covered. It didn't used to extend beyond Rosemullion Point before, so the places like Mayerporth and Gilling Bays and Swanpool were not covered by the 3 metre headline rule in the past. Here they are. So any salmon sea trout coming out of the foul have a much greater degree of protection if they're feeding in those or aggregating in those inshore waters. And moving up the coast there, you know, as I said before, we've looked to sort of stick more or less to the depth contours which are appropriate for fixed nets, and the possibility of the 3 metre headline being breached in terms of that being too close to the surface. So we've kept that to quite a complex line, but it's appropriate for what we're trying to do here, all the way up to the Dodman Point. And then coming into the St Austell Bay area, down in the bottom left-hand corner there, you will see a little area there, SO to SP. That's a beach there which has never been covered before by any bylaws to protect salmonids. So there's a first there. We have the larger light grey shaded area moving up from Blackhead, not from Blackhead, from Penair Point, all the way up to the Udder Rock and to the coast just above that, with protection there. So a very wide piece of coastline there that's covered with a 3-metre headline rule. And finally, we have an area here for the Whitsand and Loo Bay area, again drawn from the Horsestone there at AA, and this time extending right across to our boundary. In fact, the ACAD line is the north-south, or part of the north-south boundary line between us and Devon and Severn Ifka district. So we're drawing right up to that line and up to just off the end of the breakwater and into Picklecombe Point for the 3-metre headline rules. So those are all of the areas that are covered in the new bylaw proposals. So does anybody want to come back on any questions about those now before I continue any further?
Mark.
Yes, thank you, Simon. On the Halford covered by this as well, because I can't see any maps about Halford.
There you are. So we're looking here at area F. So the entrance to the Halford is covered by that area. The Halford River itself, of course, is covered by the River and Estuarine Fishing Nets bylaw.
Yeah, because there's an issue with the Halford where the line drawn across, wasn't across the mouth of the Halford, it was quite a way up the river. It should be from Rosemullion Head to Nair Point, but it's quite a way up the river from there, which seems a bit of a mockery, really.
No. Well, I'll explain the history, if you like, between the bylaws. And the fact is that we have netting bylaws now covering the offshore area and all of the Halford. So in one way or another, there is netting bylaws in place for various reasons, I should stress. It's not all about salmonid protection. This obviously offshore area is, but the netting in the river and estuarine bit is for very many reasons, and actually gives very, very high protection in the sense that, if you're to the west of that line, drift nets and fixed nets are completely prohibited. It's actually greater protection in the rivers ordinarily than there is that we've got offshore at the moment in this proposal. The line that you see there for SE is Morn and Shear, across to a point on the opposite bank, 105 degrees. That is historical, and that has always been the boundary between if you like, the river and the sea. And in days gone by, that's where the Environment Agency used to take over for all fish species, and the Sea Fisheries, the former Sea Fisheries Committee, used to have its powers only to the east of that line. And so it's kind of evolved along those historical lines, because when we were doing the River and Estuarine Fishing Nets bylaw, we just maintained what was generally accepted as river boundaries. But I would say that if we're looking to protect salmonids, they are more than adequately covered by the River and Estuarine Fishing Nets bylaw in any river.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Right.
Hello. Graham Code's hand has been up for a long time.
Hello, Graham. I can hear you, Graham. I don't know if the chairman can.
Yes, I see you, Graham.
Yeah, what I'd like to do is go back to the at any time bit of the proposed legislation for the fixed nets. I spent an inordinate amount of time in my previous employment in Crown Courts while learned barristers try their best to pick apart my evidence. And I think that the phrase "any time" is risky because it leaves room for barristers to create reasonable doubt in the minds of a jury, which would lead to an acquittal and waste all the time of the creation of the bylaw and taking people to court. I think that at any stage of the tide is far more specific, it ties it down more tightly and gives barristers less opportunity to bamboozle a jury and get an acquittal, thereby wasting all the time of CIFCA. I don't think that at any time is specific enough. I know it may well be common everyday English, but there's a reason why most law is phrased in technical, difficult to understand English, because it really ties things down. I think it should be put back to at any stage of the tide. That is more specific and will be better for getting convictions. Thank you.
Simon, do you want to answer that?
Well, yes, I disagree, basically. We've looked at this, and as I said, we've had an enormous amount of confusion, which no doubt would end up in a court over any state of the tide if people wanted to think of it that way round as well. Whilst I pick up on what Councillor is saying there, I don't see the need to change it myself. I think plain English is always better than anything which could result in confusion, and at any time I can't see how there can be any mistaking that. However, as we take this bylaw forward, there are various stages by which legal teams will look at this bylaw, including the MMO, who have seen it once, a draft already, and raised no questions at all. But of course, if this bylaw goes forward to DEFRA in due course, if this authority decides to make it, it is of course DEFRA that will sign off any new bylaw coming into law, and DEFRA lawyers will be all over it before that is allowed to happen. So I think my personal view is that we leave it as it is and see if the lawyers in MMO or DEFRA pick up on any problem with that. And I'm happy to actually raise it as a point, perhaps, when we do submit it, to make sure that it is drawn to their attention rather than just being left for someone to casually look at it. Well, I'll say casually, but someone to look at it and not consider it, perhaps every point in depth that we might want. So, happy to raise it at that level and see where we go going forward. If the lawyers decide that the councillor is indeed right, of course it would not be a significant issue in terms to redress the situation, in terms of it not materially changing the intention of the bylaw. So I think that is the way I would propose to go forward with it.
Okay, thank you, Simon.
Can I come back on that?
Yes, please, Graham.
Yeah, sure. I understand where you're coming from, Simon. But you say plain English is always best. No, it is not. Not in the Crown Court. That's why laws and bylaws have specific, rather technical and sometimes odd-seeming language, because barristers speak and judges speak different language to us. I'll have to come to the fallback position of yes, please make sure that you do raise this as a specific issue as it's going through the process, because I'm pretty sure that I am right. Also, bear in mind that lawyers, barristers, solicitors looking over proposed legal text are often quite happy to allow it to remain vague, because it gives them room for manoeuvre in court at a much later date. So yes, please make sure it's raised as a specific issue.
Okay, thank you, Graham.
Very much.
Thank you. Simon Toms.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Yeah, it's just to follow up on Graham's point, really, Simon. I was just wondering whether it would be helpful to have the view of your solicitor agent on the wording of that bylaw before we go out to any other informal consultations, so that we are actually consulting on the likely wording of the bylaw before we, in case that needs to change again at some point in the future. I do take your point. I think it is, I think we've looked at it several times and we agree that it does have the meaning as the previous bylaw, but as the solicitor agent is the one that will actually prosecute the bylaw, it would make sense to have his view on that as well. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Simon. we're a little bit short of time to start bringing in legal advice at this point. If we want to get out to informal consultation again in time to get back to Bylaw Working Group in February. So in terms of getting legal advice over the Christmas period, I think it's just going to delay things. I'm hoping that we could take it forward on the basis that I've just explained, that we can look at this matter going during the period of informal consultation, which, as I say, if it did need to be changed, wouldn't materially change what it means in terms of enforcing the bylaw, and can easily be done without us having to come back here for any more decision making. The next draft that you see for making, I'd like to think had picked up on any legal advice that we could possibly get in time. So yeah, I just don't think it's going to be possible to use legal advice in time at this moment, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you, Simon. I think your Simon Cadman, your plan to raise it with a note in the papers to the effect of wording seems a fairly good plan. Sangeeta, your hand was up.
Hi, thank you, Tony. I just wanted to say that I agree that we don't want to delay this bylaw any further, and it will go through the necessary legal scrutiny at the stages with the MMO and DEFRA, and I'd like to, if we're at that stage, I'd like to propose the recommendations.
Okay, if there's no further questions, then Emma.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Sangeeta McNair has now proposed the recommendation and set out. Is there a seconder for that proposal, please? Councillor Edgerton is seconding that.
Yep, happy to second it.
Thank you very much. Okay, there are, I can't see anyone else's hands up, so there are no further proposals. So the recommendation is that members support the use of the latest draft of the fixed and drift nets salmonella protection bylaw for a further period of informal consultation. This has been proposed by Sangeeta McNair and seconded by Councillor Edgerton. I'll now call out committee member names in turn. Please confirm whether you are voting in favour or against or abstain from the vote. And I'll then count up and call the result. So, John Brooks, please.
Abstain.
Thank you. Graham Code.
For, support, whatever.
Thank you. Victoria Hobson.
For.
Mark Kasmarek.
For.
Bob Edgerton.
For.
Carly Elson.
For. Apologies, my mute was on.
Yeah, thank you. Sangeeta McNair.
In favour.
Celia Mitchell.
In favour.
John Mundy.
For.
James Mustoe.
For.
Andrew Pascoe.
In favour.
Tony Tomlinson.
In favour.
Simon Toms.
In favour.
Nick Tregenza.
For.
And Ruth Williams.
For.
Thank you. That's 14 members in favour and 1 abstention, so that motion's carried. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Emma. That brings us on to item 10 on the agenda, Bass Landing and development of compliance and enforcement measures. Sam.
Thank you, Chairman. This follows on from our last meeting in September, where this issue was raised by members and also raised by the wider recreational sea angling community and also by some commercial fishermen as well. So we felt it was important this time to actually put it on the agenda as an agenda item. So going back to the September meeting, following on from that, members had requested that I write to DEFRA regarding issues relating to the definition of targeted fisheries and unavoidable bycatch. You'll see from, I hope everybody's seen the link and seen the letter that we received 2 days ago from DEFRA. So it's quite a complex letter. We're still looking at it as officers, there's some issues that we might need to maybe go back and get some clarification on, but certainly it sets out at an UK level DEFRA's particular actions or approach to bass management through the emergency powers. And it raises some interesting points around unavoidable bycatch and the way in which the bass measures are managed at an EU level. Currently, the Fisheries Council, December Council meetings that, amongst other things, setting quota and tax, will also set the emergency measures for next year. Those meetings have carried on, but there's a bit of a pause because of the ongoing negotiations between the EU and the UK. But I understand from talking to MMO colleagues that the expectation is that the measures will be rolled over, and certainly in January 21 the measures will be the same as January 2020. Moving forwards from there, as we said, we'll have to wait for the negotiations, but I think probably we'll be looking at the same measures as we did last year. So that's at an EU stroke national level. As we discussed previously, and references made in DEFRA's response also, that moving forwards from this point, we will be looking at a domestic management regime for bass. So there are opportunities there for clarification and different ways of managing them. And of course, because we have responsibility and duties out to the 6 mile limit around Cornwall, then we also have the ability to take matters forward. So the purpose of wanting to raise this today was so that members had the opportunity to ask questions about this issue. Since we last met, we've seen quite a few landings of bass from a variety of gears, including netting. And there's been quite a lot of interest and some concern raised about those in certain areas. Really, in terms of our sort of responsibilities and our actions as enforcement officers, officers have been down to various ports to observe landings where they've been happening. We have then passed that information on to the MMO as we would normally do via Intel, and my assumption would be that they would continue to both monitor those bass landings themselves and undertake any further investigations into them as appropriate. Given the complexity of this issue and the fact that we've got a netting management plan coming on in March, what officers felt would be the best way forward and the quickest way forward now for us would be to bring these issues together, including some of the stuff that's raised in DEFRA's letter, to Bylaw Working Group, so we can look at different options that we could consider for management moving forwards. It doesn't cover issues right now, and I appreciate that, but clearly this is a matter of concern to a range of people, both commercial and recreational. And I would like to use the Bylaw Working Group discussion to actually sort of drill down into some of this information, including anything additional information we get from our enforcement activities, to be able to report back to you in March about a way forward. Hopefully also by that time we'll have clarification of the EU measures. I'm going to stop talking because I know there's going to be a lot of questions and probably a lot of statements that people want to make. So I'll stop talking there.
Right, James, your hand was up. I don't know whether that was a deliberate one from early on.
Yeah, no, it's a deliberate one. Yeah, I'd like to speak on this if I may, Chair.
Yeah,
if I may beg the committee's indulgence for a moment, I'd like to read out some comments from my inbox. Members must be deluded. Possible corruption. It is an absolute disgrace. Your whole committee is riddled with people of double standards and self-interest. This will all come out into the public domain and show you up for the charlatan you all are. Your committee days are numbered, and then maybe a responsible and honest bunch can be elected to do the job without fear or favour. You should be ashamed. Why don't you bureaucrats take your fingers out of your backsides? All from the past 24 hours. And of course, this chestnut from November. This is outrageous. You know when and where it's happening. Do what you're pated to do. Year on, this continues. Makes me think someone is getting backhanders. Do your job. I wouldn't be paid if I didn't do my job, and neither should you. Chair, the nature of these comments directed at a committee mostly comprised of non-elected members is very concerning to me and portrays perhaps a fundamental misunderstanding of the makeup of this committee from those who have written in. In my years as an elected councillor, I'm used to the hargy-bargy of political life and discourse, but it is not right for these volunteers to be subjected to the same. As an aside, nor have I found from past experience that insulting people is not a good way to win them around to your point of view. Of course, as I've said before, this is all white noise from a well-organised and well-funded niche lobby group. One of the lobbyists was even so good as to leave the instructions he was given on the email he sent in, where it says, to increase the chance of the committee member acting on your behalf, it is important that you add some personal details about why this issue concerns you. If you live or fish in Cornwall, don't forget to mention this. Numerous campaign emails made reference to a campaign taking place on social media without substantiating any evidence other than their outrage. Well, Chair, I could say that I've been alerted on social media that there are bass anglers who are catching more than they should, and call for an urgent and immediate investigation into that. But I'm not going to do that. I trust the actions and recommendations of our officers and support their course of action as set out in the last meeting. Why change course because of the targeted actions of a lobbying group and prioritise this work over other equal important work and on stock that is not targeted by anglers? That would be letting the bullies win. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Mark.
Yes, thank you for that, Chairman. I must endorse a lot of what Councillor Musto have said. But out of the probably hundreds of emails that I've received as a member of the IFCA, most of them weren't abusive. He's only read out the abusive ones. So we got to put it into context that people are passionate about how people are deliberately targeting bass, especially when it's illegal to catch them in fixed nets. And that can't be endorsed either. So, you know, we don't like the abusive emails, and it's not fair on anybody to receive them. I just press delete when something like that happens. And as James said, we are hardened councillors, we are. We do get subjected to abusive emails from time to time, which isn't acceptable. But there has been a great deal of emails, very well constructed, very well put together, and actually putting together the case on why action must be taken to stop the illegal fishery that's happening at the moment. There shouldn't be 100% bass being caught in nets, and they shouldn't be targeted by gill nets at this time of the year. And I think Sam is right that we have got to, as an IFCA, show some leadership here and actually get a bylaw in to actually protect the bass stocks. And not just our bass stocks, they're the UK bass stocks, because these bass are migrating from other parts of the country down here to go off to spawn. But what really annoys me is that the IFCA has been targeted by this, but it's the DEFRA, the government ministers, George Eustace in particular, and the MMO that has failed and left the Cornwall IFCA in this position. And we're hopefully going to be doing something now, and that's going to be encouraging for many of the people who have written into us. And I have replied to quite a number of people, but not on the abusive emails, but I've just deleted them. But we've got to make sure that we don't target everybody who's written into the IFCA as if they're all abusive emails. But I'm not sticking up for anybody who have sent them in. So we are taking a leadership on this, and I thank Sam and I thank the officers for listening, and we will get somewhere in the end, I believe.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Celia, please. Celia Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I've been talking to our fishermen, and the vast majority are saying they're doing nothing illegal, and the boats, many of our boats are under 10s and many are under 8 meters, and they need to be able to fish inshore. They say they don't target bass, but cannot avoid catching it at times. This last week, however, for example, there's been a lot of mackerel, grey mullet and pollock caught. But since the French were stopped mid-watering for bass in 2015, the stocks have improved, and this is obvious inshore. Our handliners have had an excellent year. The trawlers are avoiding large areas of ground as they can't avoid bass, and it's criminal, soul destroying to dump it. Trawlers are bigger boats and can go further than most of our small boats to try and avoid bass. The trawler bycatch was increased from 5 to 10% for 2020 to help prevent dumping. The stocks have improved, and because of this, ICES has raised the TAC by 2.8% for 2021. Although this is a modest increase, it shows confidence in the stocks. And ICES says the catch limit imposed on bass in recent years means fishing mortality has fallen well below maximum sustainable yield levels. So while that might be minimum actually. So while stocks are not yet at maximum sustainable yield, the scientists say they are being fished sustainably. If catch restrictions for commercial and recreational fishermen stay in place for the next few years, the stocks will build to maximum sustainable yield. We do not think there is a problem with bass stocks. If anybody is deliberately targeting bass, then this is illegal, but the majority do not break the law. The MMO police the boats, and many boats have been boarded since our September meeting and catches inspected. So we must make sure that when we've got our own domestic management, that it's flexible and we're not trying to restrict stocks unnecessarily in favour of one type of fishing over another, or saving stocks, for example, for hobbyists. That's me finished.
Okay, thank you very much, Celia. Graham Code.
Yes, thank you. I wasn't going to take part in this debate, but I must take friendly issue with James Mustoe. I understand what you're saying, James, but I don't think it's helpful to label any group of people who are raising issues as just a mere sort of aggressive lobby group. It's not quite accurate. As our friend Mark has said, he knows, I know, hundreds and hundreds of good, genuine, polite, pleasant people who are bass anglers. And they only hear certain amounts of stuff on Facebook and so forth, and mostly they're good as gold. Now, listening to what Celia has just said, she's absolutely right. Most commercial fishermen with nets, I'm sure, are honest, obey the rules, even if they're irksome. But it's just this small minority that the bass anglers are really annoyed about, and that we as a conservation authority need to be making sure are looked at. Now, I'm glad the MMO are taking extra action. That's what we asked for at the last meeting. That's all good. What Sam has told us is good. I know that many of the anglers will feel this is going ever so slow, but that's the way that local authorities are. Everything's got to go through the books, everything's got to be evidenced, and it's got to wait to the next meeting and be signed off and so on and so forth. It does take a lot of time, but I think we're headed in the right direction. I don't think we need any confrontation. The anglers are good guys. I'm sure most of the netters are good guys. It's just those few semi-criminal elements that we need to sort of focus on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Graham. Nick Tregenza, please.
Really just a request to Sam for information. Can you tell us the total of the 100% bass landings? And also, I mean, if you have the figures, the quantities of bass that were being landed by the pelagic trawlers before they were pushed out.
So, can you just repeat the second part was about the pelagic vessels? I could get that figure for you after the meeting. I don't have that to hand at all. But
okay, the first part was about the actual total of the landings that were 100% bass?
Yeah, I'm going to hand that to Colin because I know that's a matter he's looked at. So if you're happy, Nick, I'll hand that to him. So thanks, Col.
Sorry about that. Having a bit of trouble getting my mic back on. The last lot of data we have is full year of data is for 2019, which was received from the MMO previously for in line for the last meeting. In Cornwall in 2019, there were 103 landings that consisted 100% bass. Of those landings, 46% were under 10 kilos each. 70% represented 30 kilos and under per landing, and the overall figure for those landings was, just here. Sorry about this, just pick the right one. The overall figure for that was 6.5 tons for 2019 over 103 landings.
Okay.
But we don't, as I say, but we don't know for definite that that was netted. As we reported in the last authority meeting, the landings data is derived from sales notes, not direct, and it's attributed to a vessel's default type. So a vessel on the, I believe, I'm sure Carly can put me straight on this. Vessels have a default type to which the activity is logged against when their sales notes are in there. The fact that 70% was under 30 kilos, we don't know whether that could be handlined, that could be netted. You know, we really genuinely don't know how that was caught.
Carly, could you come in here? Could you enlighten us at all in any way on that?
Yeah, I can a little bit. So yeah, you're right. There is a default effort. Normally it's done on people, well, in the past, what it's been done on people's knowledge of the vessels. A lot of the officers will feed into that and work with our admin teams to make sure that the gear type is recorded correctly. But of course, what's been put in to try and rectify this is the under 10 metre catch up to capture that one of those specific things, the gear type being used. So we're ensuring that the actual gear recorded is correct, and then it helps it attribute to which quota it equates to.
That's fine. Thank you for that, Carly. Okay, does that answer your question, Nick?
Yes, it's useful. I mean, I think when you look at those figures, the amount being taken by the larger pelagic trawlers was far, far bigger than this. And I think the picture we see there is consistent with the likelihood that this stock is actually recovering. And while I very much appreciate what the bass angling community and some commercial fishermen are saying, I think that we're not sort of going downhill fast, and we are heading towards a better response to this in terms of a netting bylaw. And I think we should just continue with our plans on this. And if the angling community want to press this further, it's really the MMO and DEFRA they need to address, because they have the competencies to deal with the current situation. We really can't.
Okay, thank you for that, Nick. Right, Sutton Toms.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I was just going to ask and just pick up on Celia's point about the status of bass stocks and wondering whether the IFCA officers could provide us with a summary of the status of bass stocks based on the IC's advice. I've just had a quick look at it, and it does actually demonstrate that bass stocks have not recovered to the point they were at pre-2014. So I think it would be helpful to use evidence to inform the committee based on the IC's advice rather than anecdotal reports. Thanks.
Andrew Pascoe, please.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on most people have raised a lot of questions I would have done anyway, and I think rightly so. But the grey area around unavoidable bycatches has always been a problem and was always going to be a problem to police, and I'm sure we'll probably see something different in the future on that wording. But the blatant landing of fish over your monthly allocation has been the problem that's been arising of late. But the most concerning thing regarding that issue is that a couple of fishermen actually went to Cornwall IFCA officers and to the MMO officers, and Carly's online today to listen to this, to say that these vessels were landing to other different vessels, and that they were obviously going over the monthly allocation, transshipping fish and so on, anonymously. But their names have somehow got out of either the IFCA office or the MMO office back to the fishermen that were allegedly doing these landings to different boats, resulted in them getting abuse and so on. So that is a major concern to me, that this has been allowed to get out when somebody's gone to both groups to anonymously give some information. So I find that really concerning that that's got out. So just really to raise that and make sure it doesn't happen in the future. With any luck, this will be all resolved with IVMS, with the catch app. That transshipping of fish and landing different boats shouldn't then, in theory, be able to happen. You can tell whether the boat's been at sea or not with the IVMS, and you can tell what the boat's got on board with the catch app before they get back to harbour. So hopefully things will be much easier to police in the future.
Thank you for that, Andrew. I think I'll need to ask Sam and Carly to comment on that, please.
If I may, Andrew, with regards to the information received with respect to that incident, I received that information personally, and that wasn't shared outside of the IFCA, and I have absolute 100% confidence that that information did not come from here. 100% confidence. Happy to talk to you afterwards about it, but the call came to my phone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Carly?
Yeah, again, Andrew, I'd be quite happy to speak to you offline. It's not something that I'm aware of at all. It shouldn't not happen. We have lots of protocols in place to ensure when we receive intelligence, any sources are always sanitized, and that is kept centrally in a secure place. So if you want to have a little chat offline about it, then I can obviously follow that up. But like Sam, I can't see. I'm very concerned to hear that, and I'd like to follow it up. But again, I'd like to think it hasn't come from officers, but obviously it has come from somewhere. So if me and you can have a little chat, perhaps after the meeting or at some point today or next week, that would be great.
Okay, thank you for that, Carly. Celia, please.
Yeah, I'm just coming back from what Simon Tom says. What does anecdotal mean?
Simon. Simon, would you like to clarify what you meant by that?
I got this information from a genuine ICES report, and I didn't say that stocks were back to what they were originally before 2014, but they are increasing, and the scientists say they've been fishing sustainably. And when we look at 6.5 tons as 100% catch, one of those mid-water trawlers that were stopped in 2015 would have caught more than that in one shoot. So all I'm saying is there's not a problem with stocks. They are rebuilding. We don't have to be draconian about things, but we do need to carry on making sure that restrictions are in place till they have rebuilt. It won't take long, I don't think.
Okay, thank you for that, Celia. Simon seems to have vanished for the time being.
Yeah, well.
Andrew, did your hand?
Simon's just come back in, Chairman. I think his connection had dropped out.
Yeah. If I can come back on that, Tony, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to explain to Celia that anecdote is effectively based on just hearsay, and I think if we're going to rely on advice, for this committee, we should be relying on the official ICES advice in relation to bass stock status.
Simon, I did have a report.
Yeah,
It was a
Celia, if you let me speak. I have seen that in the press myself, the ICES figures, Simon. It's not as if Celia's pulled that out of thin air.
No, it's just what I'm getting at, Chair, is that I think the rest of the committee haven't seen that ICES advice. So if we could have a summary of the ICES advice, that would help all of the committee members to actually make a informed judgment on the status of bass stocks. Thanks.
Okay. Right. Sam, your hand is stuck.
Yes, it's no problem to summarise that advice. That was some of the thinking behind actually pulling all this stuff together, is that it offers an opportunity to go into more detail. So yeah, we can look at that as well. So thank you very much.
Okay, Sangeeta.
Thanks, Tony. I just wanted to thank the officers for the comprehensive report. I've been listening to the discussions, and I'd like to put forward the recommendation in the report that the officers develop a scoping paper and that this is taken to the Bylaw working group for a full discussion in February, so that then it can be brought back to the March committee meeting.
Okay, just before, I'll hand over now to Emma to take that forward, the recommendation.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mrs McNair, for proposing that. Is someone indicating that they wish to second that proposal?
John Brooks.
John Brooks. Could you confirm your seconding?
I'm not wishing to.
You're not wishing to
second it. I'm just concerned that all of a sudden we seem to have had a proposal which is curtailing discussion. I just want to make sure that nobody else has got any points they want to raise. My point is that if a boat goes out and lands a load of bass and they bring them back, and then they go out the next day to the same place, you can't say that is not targeted. That's my comment, but I don't know whether anybody else has got any questions, because I just think that...
Thank you for chairing the meeting, John. I think I can cope with it. I think we gave everyone every opportunity. You had an earlier opportunity to have spoken. But anyway, if anyone does have anything further to add, please could they put their hand up straight away, and we move to the recommendation that's come from one of our members. John Mundy.
Yes, I just wanted to share that I've received, I don't know whether the other members have, sort of quite a large produced leaflet from the organisation. Now, they claim it's from MMO data, but they're highlighting a couple of vessels. One which is said to have had 36 trips containing bass, 22 of which were 100% bass, and another boat over 2 years in 2019, 16 trips with 1,100% bass, 98% that is. No, it's not 98%, but they say it is. And the year before, 29 with 19 containing 100% bass. So I'll share this at the Bylaw working group, but I just wanted to say, I don't know how accurate or anything these figures are, but they have been sent to me, and I just thought I'd share it.
Thank you for that, John. Right, John Brooks, did you want to come back in again? Your hand is up.
Sorry, I thought I put it down.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, Ruth Williams.
Yes, thank you. It was really to just sort of support Sangeeta in the recommendations. I think there's two issues here that we almost need to think about in parallel and slightly separately. I agree that this is part of a much bigger issue, and we need to get that scientific evidence compiled from the ICES data relative to our Cornish fishery. And I think that the best way to do that is as recommended and coming back with a report to the Bylaw Working Group in February, and we can discuss and hopefully take things forward from there. I think the issue that has sparked a lot of the anger and frustration from the lobby and from others is about the fact that this is repeated catch of bass, and it's 100% landings, and that then becomes, that can't be deemed as unavoidable. So I think the second element of our work does need to be to maintain pressure on MMO and DEFRA to clarify this loophole in the current EU legislation, and we need to consider that in conjunction with any possibility of Cornwall IFCA bylaws or this becoming part of the net management plan. So I think there's these two issues that need to be addressed. And I second Sangeeta's proposal that this should come back to the Bylaw Working Group in February.
Okay, Sangeeta, you wish to come back on that?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Ruth, and also to just come back to John to say that I'm not trying to curtail discussions. We talk about bass for a long time, each committee meeting, and it is a single species that has important issues that need to be taken to an important informed discussion at the Bylaw Committee meeting, which is the working group that's been set up by this committee to have these detailed discussions. We do have substantial amount of time given to this discussion each committee meeting, and in the officers, the chief officer's report, which we'll come on to, we can see the whole breadth of work that is carried out by the IFCA and its officers, and there are many items there that warrant time for discussion as well. Thank you.
Okay, right, thank you, Sangeeta. Right, is there any more? Otherwise, we have a proposal and a second, which I can pass across to Emma. No more response. Emma, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the recommendation is that officers develop a scoping paper for discussion by the Bylaw Working Group in February 2021, and this has been proposed by Sangeeta McNair and seconded by Ruth Williams. I'll now call out committee members' names in turn. Please will you confirm your name and if you are in favour, against or wish to abstain from the vote. John Brooks.
In favour.
Thank you. Graham Code. Graham Code.
Graham just typed in the box that he had to leave, Emma.
Ah, okay, thank you.
He's literally at 11:44. He said he had to leave.
Right, thank you. Lovely. Victoria Hobson.
In favour.
Thank you. Mark Kasmarek.
For.
Thank you. Bob Edgerton.
For.
Thank you. Carly Elson.
For.
Thank you. Sangeeta McNair.
In favour.
Thank you. Celia Mitchell.
In favour.
Thank you. John Mundy.
For.
Thank you. James Mustoe.
For.
Thank you. Andrew Pascoe.
For.
Thank you. Tony Tomlinson.
In favour.
Thank you. Simon Toms.
In favour.
Nick Tregenza.
For.
Thank you. And Ruth Williams.
For.
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that's been carried unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Emma. And if we now move on to item 10, I beg your pardon, the 11 Cornwall Chief Officer's report.
Thank you, Chairman. As usual, I think we'll step through, so I'll say a little bit and then hand over to Simon and Colin to take any questions as well. I feel like a bit of a Groundhog Day every time I write these reports, in as much as we would like to have a conclusion as to the situation we find ourselves in at the end of the year. I would imagine that those negotiations are now at fever pitch, and hopefully we will hear something very shortly. But in the meantime, I just wanted to use the report to highlight to anyone who wasn't aware of the range of guidance that's available now for those involved in the fishing industry, whether from merchanting or transport or catching sector, retail sector. There's a lot of guidance out there as to what steps to take moving forwards beyond the end of the year, because clearly whether there's a deal or whether there isn't a deal, things are going to be quite different. We're involved at a national level with DEFRA's Brexit EU exit planning groups. Those are meeting weekly, and I think probably those will start meeting daily. Essentially, DEFRA, MMO and others are all being stood up from the 28th onwards. So I think at that point, particularly for the bigger organisations like DEFRA and the MMO, there will be sort of rolling 24-hour cover for particular functions. We obviously don't have the capacity to do that here, but officers are making themselves available for charter work moving forwards into the new year. And we will see how that evolves depending upon the settlement that we have. It's going to be some interesting times. And at the same time, we've now got the Fisheries Act, so that's now been confirmed and is in place. And the first meeting for the development of the joint fisheries statement I think that was held yesterday or the day before. So this is the joint fisheries statements that we will have to have between Ireland, Wales, Scotland and England. And that forms the first level of the management process moving forwards. We've had very early discussions with DEFRA around fisheries management plans, and there's certainly work streams underway to look at shellfish management plans, sort of led by the sort of crustacean shellfish industry. So there's a lot of work that's now started in the background to start to implement the Fisheries Act. So I think moving forwards, this is going to be an interesting time, certainly a very busy time. So I would anticipate that our reports moving forwards to you will start to increase in detail with regards to this sort of national work. And the other bit on my section was about recruitment of new general members to the IFCAs. There's a national recruitment campaign being run by the MMO. The closing date is the 4th of January, with a view to appointing members for each of the IFCAs, both to replace immediate vacancies and also to act as a reserve list to replace vacancies in an ongoing capacity. So if there's any questions on those pages, very happy to take them, and if not, I'll hand over next to Simon.
Ruth.
Thanks, Sam. Just a quick query on the recruitment to our IFCA. How many vacancies have we got, or are we expected to have in the near future?
I think it will be 4. I think so. I'd have to check that. But we've obviously got an immediate vacancy at the moment because of Mr. Muirhead's retirement. So yeah, I'll check that and get back to you about that. But yeah, moving forwards, I think the idea is, rather than the MMO doing recruitment every time there's vacancies all the way around the country, what they wanted to do was have something that was more comprehensive and could fill those vacancies moving forwards.
Okay, thanks.
John Brooks.
My question is very similar, because when we formed a few years back, we drew lots to see how many years people would sit on the committee. Is there going to be, I can't remember how long I've been on.
You've got a little while yet.
No, I think I've extended it already, and I don't think that what we were originally told about how long people were going to be on before they had to reapply, so that there was a constant change and new blood coming onto the IFCAs. I don't think that's happening, is it?
No, we'd ended up with a bit of a cliff edge. So though that staggered approach that was originally put in place, because this has gone on so long that kind of disappeared. So moving forwards, new appointees that, again, as I understand it from the MMO, will be trying to again re-establish that staggering, that incremental bit, so that you don't end up having this again further down the line.
Okay, thank you for that, John. Sangeeta.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks, Sam, for the report as well. And it's just, you know, the Fisheries Act, it's incredible. We've got the first piece of fisheries legislation in decades. And it was just a question as to whether you knew any more about the fishery management plans and the timing of, because obviously it's great that the work of the officers and the Bylaw Working Group and this authority, you know, we're developing the Crustacean Fisheries Management Plan, and that will feed into these national fisheries management plans and hopefully be used as a pilot. But it was just about timings for that, Sam. Thank you.
You can see me flicking through all my notes here. One of the national meetings that we had, and I probably won't be able to find it now. The Act sets out the timings for the joint fisheries statement, which has to come first, and I think that there's an ambition to start consulting on that and on the start of the fisheries management plans in 2021. I think summer 2021 for the joint fisheries statement, and then development and fisheries management plans I think is into 2022. I should have brought my copy of it with me. So we have been we'd started dialogue with the relevant officers within DEFRA. So it's trying to work out, I think, from DEFRA's perspective, and also then the devolved administrations, at what kind of level of detail those fisheries management plans will be. So they could be spatial, so they could cover a particular area, like maybe just cover Scotland, or maybe Scotland and England. They could cover a particular fishing method like pelagics. So there's an interest from the Scottish industry because of the importance of the pelagic fishery up there. The shellfish, so crustacean shellfish industry, through the Shellfish Association of Great Britain, has convened a shellfish group that's working closely with DEFRA, because that sector really wants to move forwards with a crustacean management plan at a national level. And I think DEFRA is seeing that as a potential pilot. And then there's the question about which IFCAs have already raised, because other IFCAs have already brought forward fisheries management plans. If you've got the fisheries statement and the bigger fisheries management plans, how we then kind of link in and connect at a more local level, whether there's a regional element, so covering greater areas, and this in turn then ties in with the Inshore Fisheries Management project that DEFRA have been involved with, run by Seafish, to look at management areas for inshore fisheries management, in addition to what currently goes on at an IFCA level. So it's like a sort of layer cake at the moment, and I think our ambition here has been to get the crustacean fisheries management plan to a point where we can use that as an exemplar for DEFRA and say, this is what it comes down to at a very local level. This is the sort of decision making that we would need to make. This is how we would deliver it potentially through bylaws. But really importantly, also, this is a mechanism by which we want to bring in people working in that sector, people fishing in that sector with a variety of sizes of vessels, into a sort of consultative group to actually look at that fisheries management plan and feed into it. Because at a national level, those groups will tend to be populated more by some of the bigger interests. And at our level, right down on the coast, we want to make sure that everybody is represented, whether they've got a small sort of 4 or 5 metre punt right up to the larger vessels. So it was a long description to really a short question, but I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you, Sangeeta.
I'll pass on to Simon, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Okay then, picking up on my report, Sorry if there's a bit of interference here. I've got a motorbike outside the window running away there. So yeah, as usual, my report starts off with an overview of the cases that we've been looking at in recent months, if not years. And as you can see there, a significant amount of court work coming up, and I would suspect more to follow. So 2021 is going to take up a lot of time, I think, for warranted officers seeing these cases through to a conclusion. I'm happy to basically go through my report in terms of going through pages and see if anybody else wants to pick up on any particular matter. You know, if we could carry on from page 58 to 59, I'll watch for a hand. 60 and 61. And 62 to halfway through 63. Okay.
Sangeeta, yeah.
Sorry, it's me again. I'm not sure what page it was on. I just had a question about the video crubbers. Do we know how many are working in the district at the moment?
I couldn't give you an absolute figure because apart from boats that are based locally, there are one or two that might visit from other areas. And so when you say how many are working in our area, that's not necessarily easy to quantify. It might be different at different times of the year. But I would suggest that the number of vivia crubbers is increasing. We see constant boats being converted or brought into the area. The larger capacity boats which can fish in our district, yes, I would say has gradually crept up over the years. That's the best I can say on it at the moment. Of course, that will be looked at in great detail when we come to do our crustacean fisheries management plan in terms of the amount of effort. And I know it's of great concern to a lot of inshore fishermen who can't venture further offshore than their local patch of coastline.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Simon Toms next.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, Simon, it's just a quick query. I noticed that your report doesn't cover the St Ives gillnet fishery bird bycatch predetermined level. I was just wondering, does the committee actually have to agree that before it's communicated to the fishermen in St Ives? Because I looked at the bylaw this morning and it does seem to say that the committee has to agree that level. And I was just concerned that if it's not agreed, then it may not be possible to invoke the bylaw.
No, so the answer to that, Simon, is that we consult with you and the Environment Agency and others, and on the basis that nobody's raised any concerns, the bylaw stands, and it's not a problem. And so I can report that we have had no should we say negative responses to the consultation, and therefore we're going to move forward as we have for the last 20 years.
Okay, but doesn't the committee have to sort of sign it off effectively?
No, the bylaw is in force. It's just that we're required to consult with you and with the Environment Agency and other organisations on an annual basis on that trigger figure. As nobody has suggested that trigger figure is actually changed, we stick. We've gone for the figure that we've, I say, historically gone with for the last 20 years. But the bylaw is always there. It just requires that consultation before the next year starts.
Hey, the bylaw does say though, Simon, that the committee will be consulted annually.
Well, all I can say is we're following the process that we've always followed. We don't bring it forward to the committee with a recommendation, or we never have done before. So you know, I'm content that the bylaw is valid and that we can enforce the trigger figure on the basis of having consulted about it.
Okay. Perhaps Simon, if you can just confirm that in writing to Simon Toms. when you get back to the office, so as to speak?
Yes, I can do.
Thank you very much. Sangeeta.
Sorry, me again. It was just on that, the trigger figure. So Simon, you wrote to us and we responded, but I know also the RSPB wrote to say that they would really appreciate a meeting in at some point in 2021 to talk about the kind of national strategies that are happening with seabirds. So we would really welcome that, just to have that wider discussion.
Yes, yes, I think that would be very welcome as well. But it's going to fit very neatly with our net fisheries management plan. So going forward through Bylaw Working Group, as we get into that work, accidental seabird bycatch is one of a number of things we will have to consider at that group. And of course, at that point, we will be seeking the engagement with the RSPB for their very valuable input.
Okay, thanks for that. Simon, Tom's again.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's just to support Sangeeta's comment there. We would support that view that it would be helpful to have a meeting about this and to also see the evidence that's being used to justify the threshold level. That is outstanding, and I think it would be helpful to see it. But I'll wait for Simon's email. Thank you.
I'll just say that the threshold level, of course, was set following an extensive bit of research when the bylaws developed 20 years ago. Whilst it hasn't been repeated, you know, we've got nothing to suggest that the science has significantly changed in terms of the seabirds that frequent that bay in St Ives. So it is based on science, but yeah, there's no harm in certainly looking at the evidence again in due course when we're engaged with our net fisheries management plan and all of the work that's going to involve, which is going to be hugely extensive.
Okay, right. Thank you, Simon. If you'd like to carry on now, or have you finished yours?
I feel that I've got as far as page 63, where Colin can take over, unless anyone else has another comment or question.
Okay. On to Colin.
Hello, having some technical issues here, sorry. I was going to go through the usual. If I go through pages, if anybody, I'll try and make sure I can see everyone. If anyone would like to just shout out if they've got any questions on any of the pages. 63. Ah, Ruth.
Ruth?
Hi, sorry, I was a bit preemptive then. It's actually for page 64 and 65.
Go on then. See the future, obviously. Yeah.
Can I go ahead? Has anyone got any other 63s?
No, I think you can go ahead.
All right, thank you. It was just a quick one. I know it was a survey for Devon and Severn, but at the bottom of 64 and in 65, you talked about the surveys that you were doing in Tor Bay, and particularly some work looking at the impacts, excuse me, impacts of cuttlefish traps on the seagrass. You said that data had been analysed. I was just wondering if you had any results and if there was any impact.
So we analysed the acoustic data for them. We haven't done any of the video data. That was handed straight over. We just handed the camera straight back to them. So you'd have to contact them for that, I'm afraid, Ruth.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, Colin.
Yeah. Any others on 65? 66, 67, 60. Another one, Ruth?
Sorry, me again. Yeah, page 67. It just says that you'll give a verbal update on the fowl fishery oyster enhancement project. Any feedback from your discussions with them?
Yeah, basically, I managed to do this. I had to call a line on it yesterday with the number of questionnaires returned. We sent out 29 out of the 30 licence holders. 15, we had 15 returned up until yesterday. 10 were in favour of the proposal, 4 said no, and 1 was fairly much sat on the fence and said both yes and no in the same sentence. So. Generally, I mean, I think the sticking point would be the adoption of voluntary measures by the license holders, which I'm not sure whether I didn't word the question in the questionnaire particularly well, but we sort of seemed to get more response about how they felt their view on the fishery. So I'm not really sure we're going to be in a position to go forward with that at the moment. We've been successful with the grant funding from Fishmongers Company, but I think we'll probably end up returning that because I'm not sure whether we'll go ahead with this one.
Okay, thanks for the update.
Any others on 67? Sam?
Victoria. Yeah.
Oh, Sam, go first, that's fine.
Sorry.
Sam first and then Victoria.
Sorry, thank you, Victoria. Sorry. Yeah, it was just about the Eddystone project, and just a comment to say that it's just to congratulate the officers, because that's a project that's been going on for a large number of years. I mean, I think it said, 2014 to 2019, and Colin and his team have been going out to the Eddystone and collecting that data. And it's great to see that paper's been submitted to the Marine Policy Journal for review and hopefully publishing. So yeah, that's great. And I think also it's just there's so much information here and so much good work that's gone on, because the next paragraph then talks about the standard operating procedure that's been drafted. That's not a small thing. That's a great amount of work by Annie, and yeah, she should be congratulated, and
yeah, definitely.
His team should be.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sangeeta. Victoria.
Yeah, well, mine was just to say thanks to Colin and the team for the amazing way that they managed to link up to do live surveys for the students at the University of Exeter to watch. They've not been able to get out and do field work as they might do with the COVID limitations, and the technical challenges that faced in order to do a live stream and things was they were not insubstantial. So thank you very much, Colin, to all your team, and it was much appreciated by both the staff and students at the university.
Oh, lovely, thank you. It was good to get that one done for you.
Right. Thank you. Right, Colin.
Yeah, page 68. And page 69. And I think other than the table, that's it from me.
Right, thank you very much, Colin. Are you going to take, or Simon, are you going to take on the report from Dan and the vessel?
Yes, yes, Chairman. I'm happy to take on the boat crew members of my team. So I'll again just follow forward with pages as we go. On page 71, the report of Dan Matthew. Somebody's got a hand up.
Oh, Colin, did you have something? Your hand is.
I think that's an accident there.
Sorry, that was an accident.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Right. So page 71 to 72, with going on now onto the Chief Engineer's report, and page 73, leading on to the Chief Engineer's refit report at the bottom of page 73, going forward into page 74 and 75 and 76 through to 77. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Simon. Okay, that concludes item 11. Item 12, I have no other business to consider, which purely leaves me to thank everyone for their attendance and for a very useful, frank and fruitful meeting. I'd like to also say a very happy Christmas to everyone. Despite the circumstances, I hope you all have a very pleasant and enjoyable Christmas and New Year, and look forward to seeing you all again in 2021, when we hope for better times. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Happy Christmas, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good